All right, this is the Village of Peotone Board meeting for November 10 of 2014. Begin by rising to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Riker.
Here.
Mr. Hupkey.
Here.
Mr. Wicker.
Here.
Mr. Hack.
Here.
Mr. Callahan.
Here.
Mr. Forsythe.
Here.
Let the record show that all trustees are present. We have a quorum. We may conduct business officially. First order of business being the approval or correction to the October 27, 2014 regular village board meeting minutes. Trustees, I will entertain a motion to approve them as submitted, or if you see a need for a change, please let us know what that change would be.
Motion to approve.
Motion by trustee Hupkey, second by trustee Hack to approve the minutes as presented. Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Hupkey.
Yes.
Mr. Hack.
Yes.
Mr. Callahan.
Yes.
Mr. Forsythe.
Yes.
Mr. Riker.
Yes.
Mr. Wicker.
Yes.
Motion carries, minutes are approved. Next item is the accounts payable and the payroll. Trustees, you have in your packet the payroll for the pay period ending October 11 of 2014 in the amount of, is that correct, October 11? Yeah, because this is, right.
Make sure I changed it. You've got payroll, I took payroll on here.
Oh,
One page,
1025.
1025, yep.
Okay, we didn't change the form. All right.
Right,
It's the payroll
Sorry.
for the pay period ending 10/25 of 2014, which makes more sense.
yes.
Otherwise, somebody missed a paycheck. In the amount of $45,139.77, we have from the general fund bills totaling $128,287.09, and that includes paying the debt certificate of $103,227.75 for the street work as part of that 128. In the water and sewer fund, we have bills totaling $54,074.02. Grand total of all the general fund and water and sewer fund bills is $182,361.11. I'll entertain a motion to pay the bills as presented.
I make a motion, we pay the bills.
Second. Motion by trustee Wicker, second by trustee Riker to pay the bills as presented. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Wicker.
Yes.
Mr. Riker.
Yes.
Mr. Forsythe.
Yes.
Mr. Callahan.
Yes.
Mr. Hack.
Yes.
Mr. Hupkey.
Yes. Okay. Motion carries, and the bills will be paid as noted in the agenda. We have come to the point on the agenda for public comment and/or questions about any non-agenda item. In other words, if you were on the agenda later, that's when we'll talk to you about it. Is there anybody here with any non-agenda item? Okay.
I'd like to bring something up.
Yes.
We had our meeting with a couple representatives from the school board and the Park District Board last week. Very productive meeting. No animosity. Everybody got along. It was good. It was a step in the right direction. One of the main things that came up at the end of the meeting was Blue Devil Drive. I think it's Trustee Callahan's, in my opinion, that it's imperative that the Blue Devil Drive be done. It's a staple of our community right now. It's visited by many. Everybody sees it coming from the school, going to the Park District. Kids ride their bikes up and down it. In an ideal world, it should be the Parks District's responsibility to do it, but realistically, it's not going to happen for years. I think the school agrees with us that we need to do whatever we can do to get it done, and they're willing to help us if we can do whatever we need to do to get it done. So I'm kind of looking for feedback from the other trustees or opinions, ideas on what we can do to do this, if we can.
Okay, just to reiterate what I think you're saying, the school district has indicated that there's a willingness to participate in what might be the cost involved with
Yes.
this? Okay. One could say a lot of things about what should have happened sooner, but what will not. Trustees, do you have any input on this?
Do you have any idea about price figures? What it would cost to?
I've heard two different, originally the park got a quote for 43,000. When we did all the bidding for our projects, it was closer to 60,000. So I would say 60,000 being the high, 40-something thousand being the low.
And you're saying that the school district would help on what part, what do they mean by help as far as what's the
They said they'd be
percentage?
comfortable coming back, going to their board with a maximum of 50%.
And to clarify, this is just their committee members also advising us.
Is that a payout or a loan?
It's a payout.
It's a payout.
Our proposal's a payout. And the school district committee members were bringing it back to their board as well. It's not committed to, obviously, by either board at this point. It's something that we both agreed to bring back to this board and their board.
One of the things that I personally would like to see if we go down this road is the park district has the ability to put on a referendum to, as a tax base for park roads and upkeep on their roads. Now, I don't know if the taxpayers in Peotone will ever vote that referendum in, but I think it's their responsibility to at least try for it after this point, because in the future, it would be nice for them to have a tax base or revenue for them to maintain their facilities and roads.
Okay. Now, technically, we cannot take any action per se at this
Correct.
time. We can make recommendations to be presented to us at an upcoming meeting, correct?
Correct.
All right.
Yes.
So, it's kind of a consensus type of thing?
I still have other questions.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll add one more thing too, real quick. The original discussions that we were having was roughly that the park might have the work done in the context of a loan. But in evaluating their finances at this point and going forward, we don't think that it will be years before they can even come close to paying off our share of that contribution. And our concern is that the debt load they've already have at this point, in addition to other discussions about paying 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, we also realize that the park simply doesn't have 1/3 to pay. And so ultimately, if we're going to get this done, it would really fall on us and the school in some capacity. And basically, our discussions really came down to that parking lot as it stands now, as Trustee Forsythe stated, is an eyesore across the board, but also it's used on a daily basis by students, parents, visitors, out-of-towners. The list goes on. And in that respect, although it may not be village property, we feel as though it's representative of the village and essentially something that really has to be taken care of in a village context. It may not be the village board's responsibility in a legal capacity, but we feel as though it's representative of our town and our community, and so one way or another it has to get done. And that's why we're bringing this to the board.
You were talking about the revenue. Do we know what type of revenue that they're bringing in per year?
I understand that they bring in roughly $200,000 per tax installment. Now, I haven't verified that myself, but that's the figures that I was quoted when I asked that same question.
And this may be a question for you, for the lawyer. What is the maximum term as far as if we made a loan to the park district? What's the maximum amount of time that could be paid back? Is there any such thing as a maximum?
Well, yeah, 20 years.
Also, I agree with Trustee Forsythe and Callahan that this needs to be done in some way, shape, or form. It's a safety issue. I mean, we don't want people, like they say, coming here and seeing this and looking at it, and it's a representation of us, and they look at this and, wow, this looks like it's a poor community or whatever. We don't want that. But on the other hand, I don't want the board or
us to be enablers, meaning that every time that something happens with the park district, they fall back on the village. Well, don't worry about it, the village will pay for it. Also, being as a resident, speaking as a resident, I already pay taxes, and you just wonder, are there checks and balances in place for the park district as far as what's spent, who checks it? Do we know that?
I think at this point, with their new board and their new structure that they're working on, there's certainly much more in terms of their checks and their balances. I'm not sure historically if there was such practices. I really can't speak to that, but given their financial state, you'd have to wonder.
What would the board think of having, I know this is just up for discussion, but having this tabled until we can maybe ask the residents themselves what they think, maybe having them come to an open, this is just a suggestion for me, for a committee of the whole meeting, to get their opinions, because it is their tax dollars that we're saying, let's pay for this.
I have a technical question. I think underlying this is the assumption that we're trying to get it done this
Well, That's
paving season.
also
Before
one of
the
the
weather gets
questions.
bad.
Is that even possible?
Well, I mean, there are two, operationally, there are two questions. One, and I don't mean to put our engineer on the spot, but if he can give us the best estimate. One, can we still get it done this year? And two, there's assumption that we have the money, and we've already cut one street out of our paving program. And we don't have the final bills yet to know how tight we are. But the street we cut was less than $30,000, if I remember right. Okay? So if we do this, and again, I don't know what the final bills are because we haven't seen them yet. But, there may be a thing where we come back to the village board and ask you where we're gonna cut $30,000 out of the street budget.
Now, could there be any type of something like a transfer of funds
Reallocation.
from another department, because this could be considered a safety hazard type thing for the residents, something like, the only thing I could think of, if we took from, like, if the chief didn't buy both squad cars yet, if there's still a squad car out there open, the funds could be transferred from there to this as
We
a.
can transfer between departments.
How-
Within departments.
How about the sidewalk program that we didn't utilize this year?
I don't recall that that was actually carried over to make up for what we would need next year.
That was in the
Okay?
motion.
So that was, we'd have to revisit that.
I just think this needs to be done, whether it's this year. What about gravel or coal patch? Even just for a temporary fix.
That's right. Input on that?
Paving would be very difficult. I mean, the
Most
paving,
of the plants closed by Thanksgiving.
they're closing, I talked to one contractor today, they're planning on closing the 24th November, so getting it paved this year is not gonna happen in that short amount of time. That could be a temporary fix over the winter, do something like that. Probably won't hold up well with plows and everything, but then come back and pave it in the spring.
One thing that also came up at the meeting that I feel we should at least raise it as a topic that we discussed. One of the discussions also had to do with the potential for long-term the village acquiring the entirety of Blue Devil Drive from beginning to end. We're not sure from an engineering standpoint whether that's something we would want. I mean, not just from an engineering standpoint, but period. But we're not sure if the engineering would allow for it. The school does use that as a bus hub, and so the buses get quite wide right there in front of the junior high. And so we weren't sure whether even logistically that was a possibility. But it was also a discussion as to whether or not that should become a village public way.
I would draw a comparison to the new high school and all the drives and everything, which are private as part of the school property, as being an example of probably the way it ought to be. So, I think the awkwardness, I think, of making it a public right-of-way in terms of village property gets us, what?
Lot of issues.
Yeah, there's more to it than on the surface. The simplest solution is, it's a private drive right now. If it remains private and a manner of maintaining it that works is created, that's probably the best way to do it.
Right. And it was just a discussion that came up throughout the course of the meeting, and I think really at that point, we were brainstorming for ideas as to what will it take to get this done. And that was just one topic that came up in that conversation.
Okay, so to put together what's come out of this discussion so far, it appears as though there is some concern of a safety issue that perhaps something should be done. We're at the end of the season for actual paving to occur, so patching or filling with gravel is the only thing that probably can be done at this time until the weather gets good. By that time, a lot of the gravel and the other stuff is going to wear away.
Also, by that time, the new budget would be
Oh, well, yeah,
presented,
then
and
we'll be working
then
on
we
budget
could
at
work
that
on
point.
something as maybe like a loan or type of thing to the park district to get this done, since wasn't aware of the 20 years. But again, I'm very adamant about having the residents have some kind of a say, nay or yay, or suggestions, ideas, thoughts, at least put it to where it's at least one of the committee of the whole meetings. It's my suggestion.
Okay. What is the sense, getting back to the original discussion, of the school district's offer relative to the temporary patch?
The temporary patch would at least cover for, as they were saying, at least for this winter time, take care of something. We have to do something with that. We can't just, I don't think we should let that go the whole winter. I think something should be done, and I think that's relatively cost-effective, if nothing else, at least gravel. And gravel is how much?
Road mix is what, it's less than $5 a ton right now, I believe.
So,
I'm not against helping them, I think somehow we need to hold them responsible for it.
They
too.
gotta put some skin in the game.
Whether it's either,
They gotta
10
put
to
some
20
skin in the
year
game
loan.
along with the school district and us if we're gonna do this. But they're gonna have to float a moratorium.
but I think for safety
Gotcha.
reasons, I agree with Trustee Hupkey. I think we either cold patch it ourselves or put some road mix in it for now. You know, just to buy us some time till we get this figured out.
okay, for us to take an official action, it has to be an agenda item. The consensus, as I'm pulling it out of here then, is that the board members would like to see some sort of temporary patch that the cost of which could be underwritten jointly, ideally with even the park district throwing in a few bucks. And now that you have some direction here, if you could work towards that. In the meantime, what we will do as a board is look at putting this on another agenda item. It's one of those things that can be done fairly quickly for the stuff that we're doing. So 2 weeks out, unless there's snow cover on everything, we can basically go through it. I'm assuming this is now the consensus of the board? Okay.
The consensus is to put some temporary patchwork. Is that as part of this paving program? Is that something the village is going to do themselves? Is that we direct them where there's, you know?
I think just for safety, I think we should help them out with that part of it. Because what's that realistically gonna cost us?
And to be clear, we didn't discuss with the school or the park the idea of a temporary fix in that
Well,
respect, so we'd have to,
yeah.
of course,
I think it's a matter of informing them of what the weather issues are. and seeing who's watching this meeting going on too.
Is that something we have to put out for bid to patch, or how does that process work?
It's less than.
That would be under $20,000,
Yeah.
I would think, maintenance.
Okay.
Is it something that our own public works
That was my
department can
question too.
handle?
Not sure.
If all you're doing is filling potholes, then yes, we do that. If you want something more extensive than that, you really need a grader and a roller and, trustee
We don't have the
Hack
equipment.
is familiar with that. Those are things we don't have. So it's a function of what level of service do you want. Yes, we fill potholes all the time.
Okay.
And it's a matter, I think, of check with the other entities. Take a look at what's a reasonable thing, and we'll come together in terms of who's gonna pull it, who's gonna make it happen, and who's gonna just write a check. Okay? Thank you on that. I think we have some resolution to an ongoing issue, be it temporary. Extended public comments. Jim?
I can't think about the driveway or,
Nope. This is about the,
oh, I know what you want. I know.
that's why you're here, right?
Exactly. Okay, I'm Jim Butler. It's for those of you who don't know me, I'm the post commander here at Peotone American Legion, post 392. And what we're doing is we're requesting permission for the annual gifts for Yanks collection this Saturday, the 15th, from 8 to 2 p.m., 8 in the morning till 2 p.m. What we're gonna do is we're gonna have people, put the cans out there at various locations in town, Burcott's, First Midwest, and a few others on there.
Okay. And this is the gifts for Yank, which are always done at this time.
Yeah, this for hospitalized vets during Christmas Day.
Yeah.
We give them gifts.
Yeah. Technically, this didn't make the agenda, so
Mhm.
officially, even though it's coming up next week, we can't act on it, but we can take a motion to approve the idea pending the review at the
You
next.
can just ratify it.
We're gonna ratify it at
Just
the next meeting.
ratify it.
Looking for the right
Whatever
word.
it takes, we appreciate it.
Okay.
Just ratify it.
Motion.
Second. Okay. Motion by trustee Forsythe, seconded by trustee Wicker to approve the request for the Peotone American Legion Post to do the Gifts for Yanks collection on November 15th from 8 to 2 p.m. at the locations noted, pending ratification at the next board meeting, when it's an official item. Okay. Clerk, please call the roll on that.
Mr. Forsythe?
Yes.
Mr. Wicker?
Yes.
Mr. Hupkey?
Yes.
Mr. Riker?
Yes.
Mr. Hack?
Yes.
Mr. Callahan?
Yes.
Okay.
You got it.
On behalf of
Motion.
the post, I want to thank you guys.
Yeah, and if you have anything else coming up that needs to be approved,
We'll have the children's Christmas program coming up in December. That'll be the 20th. That's the next thing I could think of.
would you bring that?
I've got,
If it's-
the letters are already made. I could drop one off here and then we'll be.
Thank you,
plenty
it'll
of
be on the
time.
agenda,
Right, right.
with this in
Right.
plenty of time at the next
Yeah.
meeting.
That was a learning experience, I'm still learning my job.
It's your
so
first,
you know
it's your
how that
first
goes.
year in this, so, yeah,
So
that's
maybe I'll
fine.
know something about this time next year. Okay, thanks.
Set
everybody.
yourself up with a calendar
Here
that
on
kind
the
of
24?
lets you know what's coming up.
All right, thanks, appreciate it.
You're welcome, Bill. Jim. All right, any other public comment? Hearing done, we're gonna move down on the agenda, to the engineer's report. Updates on anything?
Yes, the Route 50 Corning Avenue traffic signal intersection improvement, Phase 1 engineering is finally approved. So, I know it took a while. So now we can move on to right-of-way acquisition and design phase.
Okay.
And just an update on the Corning Bridge.
Yeah.
The slab, or the deck repairs were done last week and it's open again, as you probably know by now.
Good job.
Yeah, and that turned out to be a little bit more than we anticipated in terms of the amount of work and everything that was in there, so it took a little bit longer, yeah. So it also used a little bit more of our budget. All right, trustees, any questions of the engineer? Hearing none, I'm going to move on to there is no old business audit report. We have with us Marcy Colberg from the auditing firm of Smith, Kelling, Dykstra, and Old. You watch enough TV shows, you expect somebody to say, and they have the ballots that we are going to, for the award, that we're going to certify. This is our annual audit, and Marcy has come to us every year to approve, or to explain it to us and answer questions that any of the trustees may have relative to the audit. And having said that, Marcy, tell us the good news.
Thank you. I want to thank you first off. You've got your blue, I see some of you have the blue reports there. That is what I will be covering. We are a bit later this year than we normally are. Normally we are in September, but we had to hold for the negotiations to get complete before we could finalize the pension information and all of that. So we are a bit later. I laughed, I was looking at this going, what am I going to tell them? Because it was so long ago, I don't remember some of this. Anyway, if you open up to pages 1 and 2, that is our standard independent auditor's report. You did have what people will call a clean opinion. It was an unmodified opinion, meaning everything was done, recorded correctly, all your disclosures are done, everything was good there. So just wanted to let you know on that. Pages 3 to 10, I'm not going to cover much of. That is the section called your management discussion and analysis. Actually, George puts that together. It lets the readers that are not involved with the village to read through things, know a little bit more on a high level about what happened during the year and what could be going on next year, as far as economic highlights, lowlights, whatever, different things coming into play. Exhibit A is on page 11. This tells you where you were at. As I said, it seems like a long time ago, March 31st. The governmental activities, it's split between governmental activities and business type. Your business type activities are your water, sewer, and refuse. Everything else is in governmental other than your pension fund. The pension fund is not reported here at all. Just wanted to point out a couple things in your governmental funds. If governmental activities, your cash and investments went up $281,000. Couple things caused that to happen. You did put out the debt certificates for the street project and did not spend all of those as of March 31st. So the cash was up somewhat there at the end of the year. Another thing I wanted to point out is if you look at this report and compare it to last year's report, there is a section towards the bottom there called deferred inflows of resources. That is the property taxes, deferred property taxes that are included in the receivables above, but they are not going to be spent until the fiscal year you're in right now. It's a change in accounting method that we had, and everybody, it moved the line down essentially for you guys, is all it did, but I wanted to point that out because if you look at last year, your total liabilities would have been about $500,000 higher in the governmental activities, so I don't want you to think that those went away.
Is this a result of a Gatsby kind of
It's
thing?
a new GASB 65.
Okay.
Yes, we're making changes all the time.
And-
I'm going to talk to you about GASB 68 in just a little bit too. That's going to be a
Okay,
big
and
one for
the
you guys.
acronym of Gatsby is?
Governmental Accounting Standards Board.
Thank you.
Washington, they tell us how they want things reported at the local levels. Sometimes we chuckle and say, really? You want what? But we have to follow their standards. So that is a difference there. It would have been noted in the letter, the separate letter that you guys received also, that there was that change. In the business type, your cash and investments actually decreased by about $49,000. The good news is your long-term debt also increased by $420,000. On the next page, page 12, you have to look at that one sideways here. This is an overall view of what happened during last year. It shows the expenses in the first column and then charges and grants that you received to offset those expenses. And then down in the bottom right-hand section, it shows you the various taxes and other income that offsets those expenses. So I just wanted to point out a few things to you, and I'm sure you've already heard this, and again, we're 7 months behind here. Your expenses in your governmental administrative expenses did increase by 51% over last year. 4 items. Health insurance increased, legal expenses increased, your engineering increased, and your sales tax rebate. You had a new rebate come online this year. So those 4 things, because of the street work and all of that, those items all went up. Health insurance, as we know, is increasing. You're in the pool, but your expenses did increase this year. Your public safety expenses went up 8%. Your public works went up 19%. Again, most of that was your street maintenance program, some health insurance, and there were some other professional services that did go up there. And then your economic development line went up to 43,000. You'd only spent about 4,000 last year, so you've got some economic development expenses there that happened during the year. Your business type activities, the expenses increased about 6% overall, so slightly higher than the consumer price index, but not terrible. The charges for your services stayed about the same, about $8,000 more than last year. So if you look at that, you can see that your governmental activities off to the right cost the village $2.5 million before the taxes and all that come in. Your business type activities cost $250,000 more than what you're charging for those services. So when you come down to the bottom right-hand side there, your taxes, the general revenue taxes, the first 4 lines there, did go up about 5% over last year in the business type, and then you collect some money for the bond payments in the water fund, water and sewer fund. You're collecting a few property taxes there to make those bond payments. If you go to page 20, that is where your information is on your pension plan. Just wanted to point out there, the pension plan overall went up $116,000. The employer, and I'm actually flipping to page 21 here, your employer contributions went up to $158,000 from $151 last year. Your member contributions actually fell about $5,000 this year. Your benefits increased to $115,000, the benefits that you're paying out to your retired members. Last year was about $101. You've had a new one, possibly 2. I know one new one. I don't remember if there were 2 that retired.
Depends on, yeah, I don't remember exactly when.
Yeah,
What time of the year?
If not, there was one that maybe retired in February, March,
Yeah.
the prior year, so you didn't have a full year on that one, and then one during the year. So that did increase slightly. If you go to page 37, this is where I was going to talk to you a minute. All the footnotes in that are there for your reading. It gives you a lot of detail, and there's a lot of information in the back pages that give you more detail of the numbers up front. But on page 37, the top line there is the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund, schedule of funding progress. In 2016, we're going to have another one of those GASBs that's going to come in and come into play here. If that GASB had been effective for this year, we would have been picking up about a $61,000 liability right there in the middle where it says unfunded AAL. That number is one, and your guys is only 61,000, which is very good for most that we've seen. That number is what your liability for your Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund is underfunded at the moment, based on projections and all of that. Your rate adjusts, and the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund does a nice job adjusting your rates to try to keep that number fairly low for you. Like I said, that number for you guys to bring in another 61,000 of liabilities, yes, you're gonna see it, but it's not huge. We've got some that are a couple $100,000 behind. This number, you hear everybody talking about TRS, you're not in the school system, but the TRS numbers are huge. GASB has said people don't know what those numbers are, readers of financial statements. You know, we're getting hit with all these pension costs coming up and kind of a smack in the face to everybody. Wait a minute, we're how far behind? So they're requiring, like I said, in 2016 for you guys, that'd be the first year it's effective, to report that on the face of the financials. It's always been in the footnotes. No one ever looks at the footnotes. They barely even look at the audit report. So they're not looking at footnotes, but they're going to require you to report that on the face. So that year you will take a hit. Your fund balance will just go down by whatever that liability is. So Okay, that's all I wanted to touch on. I want to thank Marcy. It was her first year without Diane. We all did fine. Like I said, we were just kind of on hold because of the negotiations, but otherwise I think everything's good. Everything has been filed with the state that's required. I don't know if you've gotten over the county clerks later this week. There's a filing that will go over there, so. Any questions that any of you have? I can attempt to answer, or I can get back to you. If you have questions at some point, our phone number is in your audit, or you can get a hold of Donna or Marcy, and they can get a hold of us, and we can get back to you. Again, we'd like to thank you guys for having us.
And thank you, Marcy. It's been a nice relationship with Smith, Kelling, Dykstra, and Ohm. And the quality of the work that you folks do, I think, is outstanding, and we appreciate your honesty and frankness with the finances of the village.
Well, that's what we do the audit, but we also try to look for best practices too, to help along, if there's, and we've told Marcy, George, I don't think calls us much, but Marcy and Diane used to call us, at times and say, hey, what do we do, and that's what we're here for too. I said we'd rather get something taken care of during the year than come in after year end and say, what'd you do, why'd you do this? So if you've got questions, just let us know.
Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I am going to sneak out.
That's okay. We'll move on to the agenda to an ordinance, deliberation and possible action on a petition to allow a special use permit at 121 West Main Street. Mr. Pat Wilder, special use petitioner to allow the auto repair shop in the B1 zoning district. And George, I think we have some additional comments in our packet, correct?
That is correct. Planning and Zoning Commission has forwarded to the village board a favorable recommendation. The special use permit application for a business to be located at 121 West Main. The special use would allow Mr. Pat Wilder to operate an auto repair shop at this location with the following conditions. Approval of the special use is granted only to the business owner. Approval of the special use shall not run with the land or constitute a covenant running with the land. The approved scope of work is limited to oil, lube, alignment, tire and battery sales, and the repair replacement of alternators, starters, brakes, fixed exhaust systems, and light mechanical repairs. Work specifically prohibited includes but is not limited to body shop, painting, engine or transmission rebuilding, and body or frame repair. Maximum vehicle weight is limited to the equivalent of an F450 or less. Approved hours of operation are 8 to 5 Monday through Friday, Saturday 8 to 4, closed Sunday. Motor vehicles may be stored outside only during approved hours of operation, and no materials are to be stored or displayed outside the building. Signs are to conform to the downtown design standards and to be approved by the village planner. Petitioner must install and maintain landscaping in accordance with the landscaping plan approved by the village planner. Dumpsters being closed and placed in an appropriate location. Petitioner is offered and will be required to paint the exterior block on the building. You have an Exhibit A of it's the photos that you submitted at the P&Z committee. Those are included as part of the conditions, those improvements, unless otherwise directed by the village, and then apply with all applicable building, fire, and safety environmental regulations. There was an additional condition stipulated saying to research paving the back of the lot. Pending a recommendation from the village engineer. Mr. Golem went out and looked at the site. It is his recommendation, you have a copy of it in your packet, that due to the topography and the lack of storm drains, that we not require that area to be done, to be paved or concrete. It can be replaced with new gravel and possibly some additional green space back there. If the petitioner wants to do it at a later date, that is their choice, but it is not a recommendation that we require it at this time. The subject site is in the historic downtown district. The building has housed auto dealers and more recently an HVAC shop. The building is currently vacant. There were no objectors present. One member of the public referenced he operates a similar business and wants the petitioner to have similar restrictions. The second property owner stated he is familiar with all auto They seem to know what they're doing in auto repair, but this is the time to place conditions on landscaping, signage, et cetera, in the approval.
All right, this would be ordinance 14-16 to approve the special use at 121 West Main Street to Patrick Wilder.
Can I ask one question? Is there a reason that we exempt engine and transmission rebuilding in all these?
It's
I mean, is that-
something, whenever we do simply because of location, there are single-family dwellings close to the shop. The petitioner stated that they don't do that kind of work.
Okay, so
You
you
offer a reason why. It's considered machine shop. When you get into rebuilding a transmission or an engine, it's a machine shop.
okay.
It's a different classification. It's also, frankly, way louder.
Yeah.
Are you Mr. Wilder?
Yes.
I just want to make sure that as a board or a town, we're not prohibiting, I don't want to scare you guys away.
A typical automotive repair shop would not do that.
Okay.
And these are all items that were discussed at the P&Z, and the petitioner was comfortable with them.
Okay. No concerns?
Typically, you would not do that anymore.
I have a question about what are you considering a fixed exhaust system?
Factory original equipment, we would like to do maybe some, if you have a single exhaust on like a truck, we might put a dual exhaust system on.
So you would have a pipe bender and so forth and so on?
Yeah.
And what about the noise level?
That wouldn't be nearly as loud, because it's not a full-on rebuild, it's maybe 30 seconds. It's also no louder than an impact gun for taking off tires. It's very similar.
Trustees, other questions?
In fact, actually, it runs off the same compressed air.
Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adopt ordinance 14-16, approving the special use with the conditions mentioned at 121 West Main Street.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion by trustee Reichert, seconded by trustee Forsythe to approve ordinance 14-16, approving the special use at 121 West Main Street. Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Riker?
Yes.
Mr. Forsythe?
Yes.
Mr. Callahan?
Yes.
Mr. Hack?
Yes.
Mr. Wicker?
Yes.
Mr. Riker? Oh, Mr. Hupkey.
Yes.
Sorry.
Motion carries. Motion carries. Good luck, Mr. Wilder. We look forward to another successful business.
Should be open early next year,
Good.
so hopefully February, maybe.
All right, thank you. Moving on with the agenda, we get to review our policies for workman's compensation insurance.
The village has workman's comp insurance with the Illinois Public Risk Fund, IPRF. Our premium coverage year 2014 was $43,875. We have received our renewal premium for coverage year 2015 of $45,470. Work compensation rates are influenced not only by loss history, but job classification and payroll. Therefore, annual premiums are adjusted close to the calendar year to reflect actual payroll, at the close of the calendar year to reflect actual payroll. So there may be an adjustment to that $45,470. IPRF has also notified the village that we have been awarded a safety grant in the amount of $3,217. IPRF will reimburse the village for the purchase of qualified safety equipment, such as safety apparel, certain tools, etc. The last grant was used to purchase new safety barricades for the Public Works Department. We need a motion to accept and renew work compensation insurance with the Illinois Public Risk Fund and authorize all of the appropriate signatures.
Any questions, trustees?
Motion.
Okay, motion by trustee Hupkey, seconded by trustee Forsythe, to authorize the renewal of the workers' compensation policy with the Illinois Public Risk Fund and appropriate signatures added to those documents. Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Hupkey?
Yes.
Mr. Forsythe?
Yes.
Mr. Callahan?
Yes.
Mr. Hack?
Yes.
Mr. Wicker?
Yes.
Mr. Riker?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Motion carries, and we will renew our workers' compensation policy with the Illinois Public Risk Fund. Next item is the property liability insurance. George?
The village is participating in an insurance cooperative called IMEC, Illinois Municipal Insurance Cooperative, that provides property liability insurance. There are currently 13 municipalities in the co-op, and 3 more communities are in the application process. The last annual premium was $51,238. Our new rate will be $52,845 at an 85% self-funding rate. For a broad view of coverage limits, review page 5 in the handout. Start at the bottom of the chart and work up to the top. The bar labeled self-insurance retention is the part of the premium each community contributes to as the co-op. This pool is then placed into the loss fund, and that's for anything above the deductible. Below $50,000 is paid from. If reserves are left after payment of claims, the pool is retained for future use or distribution back to municipalities in the form of rebates or dividends. So in other words, so far, we're only into this for the first or second year. The pool is not large. It only takes 4 to 5 years to build up a substantial pool, though it is adequate to cover the reserves. But at some point in time, all of the money that we are, quote, saving by having the pool has a good loss reserve and we have reserves built up, can be used in the future to reduce future premiums or come back to the village in the form of dividends. That's 2 or 3 years down the road at best, but we are building that up. So instead of paying that to brokers, we're keeping it in-house.
Okay. So as noted in your packet, this is purely informational, that we bring it to the board as a whole to inform you of where we are in the progress of the policy that we're already involved with. If you have no questions, then we will move on. Okay, hearing none, we come to a time when we're going to need to go into executive session for the purpose of reviewing the executive session minutes. This is required of us twice a year, and we're a little bit out of sequence because of other things that have happened for this, but this is basically our fall review of the executive minutes. And so I would, what will happen at the end of, when we come out of executive session, is we will when we come out of executive session, if we choose to release minutes, it will be in the form of a motion to publicly release those executive session minutes. And that's the only action that we anticipate upon coming out of the executive session. I don't think we have any other announcements or anything. Okay. I will entertain a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of the semi-annual review of the executive session minutes.
Motion.
Second. Motion by trustee Hupkey, seconded by trustee Forsythe, to go into executive session for the semi-annual review of the executive session minutes for potential release to the public. Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Hupkey.
Yes.
Mr. Forsythe.
Yes.
Mr. Callahan.
Yes.
Mr. Hack.
Yes.
Mr. Wigger.
Yes.
Mr. Rick.
Okay, motion carries, and we will go